After 8 long months of NBA basketball, we're finally at the end of the postseason where the Boston Celtics and Dallas Mavericks will battle it out to see who comes out as NBA champion. And you couldn't pick two better teams for this matchup, with the storyline of past teammate battling past teammate, and one of two young superstars guaranteed to win their first ring. So today, we're talking strictly about the two remaining teams in the playoffs and determining who will walk out as NBA champion. But before we get started, make sure to like this video and subscribe if you're new to the channel, as we're on the road to 1,000 subscribers, and any support would be greatly appreciated. So remember to like this video and subscribe, and without further ado, let's get right into these predictions. One of the biggest keys to the series for both of these teams is figuring out who's going to defend who. Now obviously this is going to shape up as the series goes along, but in these first couple of games it's going to be interesting to see how Joe Mazzulla and Jason Kidd figure out who defends the stars, because ultimately that could be the turning point for this entire series, because if they put the wrong guys on the wrong stars, those stars get momentum, they get their confidence up, and all of a sudden they're unstoppable by game 3 or 4. So I think it's interesting to see how they're going to pick their defenders, and starting off with the Mavericks. Obviously, the Mavericks have Luka and Kyrie, two of the most dominant offensive threats that we know today, and they were great in the previous series against the Thunder and the Timberwolves, which are two teams that have a couple of really great perimeter defenders each. But with the Celtics, I think in the starting lineup, you honestly couldn't go wrong with any of the three of Holiday, White, or Brown on either of the two. But written down for Kyrie Irving first, I have Holiday and White. Now obviously I think they can keep up with the agility, but on the perimeter I think they could be a bit of a pest to Kyrie Irving, maybe force him off his game a little bit, and I think that's going to be a key factor to this, keeping Luka and Kyrie off balance, making them question who's going to defend who, making them adjust in-game. Now obviously they're two of the best in-game adjustment players in the world, but I think it's going to be interesting knowing that there's all defensive caliber players on them at all times. Now for Luka Doncic, I have two names written down as well. I have Jrue Holiday and Jaylen Brown. Now I think in the regular season, Jaylen Brown was a primary assignment, and I would say that Brown should be the primary assignment for Doncic in this series as well. He has the physicality that can match Luka whether he goes down in the paint. He has the agility and the length to match him if he goes on the perimeter and tries one of those step-back threes. I think Jaylen Brown should get the assignment most of the time. But when Jaylen Brown's on the bench, I really do think Jrue Holiday would be perfect on Luka Doncic, especially on the perimeter. Now, once Doncic does get near the paint, once he starts backing Holiday down, that's when you're going to need to make a switch, because Jrue Holiday can't match the physicality of Luka. But on the perimeter, I do think Jrue could maybe force some turnovers. He could at least do his best to try and throw Luka off of his game. And then, of course, Jason Tatum is likely going to be on PJ Washington. Same build, same height, same everything. I mean, physicality-wise, of course, not skill-wise, but physicality-wise, I think Tatum would be perfect on PJ Washington. Stop some of those drives to the rim, and maybe play a little bit of a help defender too if they have PJ in a corner. And as for Boston, they do really have 5 great offensive threats on the starting lineup. Now, I do think PJ Washington will get the Tatum assignment. Again, he has a physicality to match Tatum. While I think Tatum will still do great on PJ Washington, he'll score a lot of points, definitely. What I think PJ Washington brings is maybe the athleticism that Tatum can have. He has the lateral quickness, he has the length, as I said before. He can maybe stop Tatum a couple of times, but ultimately it's going to be hard no matter who the Dallas Mavericks put on Tatum. And then on Jaylen Brown, I have written down Luka and Derrick Jones Jr. Again, Derrick Jones Jr. has the length of Jaylen Brown. Both of these guys have the physicality to match Jaylen Brown. But ultimately, I do think Luka will get the primary assignment, depending on how he is. Now, Luka is on the injury report, I believe, for Game 1, which is tonight. He is on the injury report for tonight. It's Luka Doncic. He's gonna play, but it's gonna be interesting to see how he deals with that knee injury, and if he is really needed on the offensive side of the ball, which he will be, of course. If he really gives his 100% on the offensive side of the ball, who he defends on defense, because there's no person to hide with Luka, and Luka's been great defensively so far through the playoffs, and I imagine he'll be great defensively in this series as well. But if he's injured, if he's not 100%, and he has to exert so much energy on the offensive side of the ball, it's going to be interesting to see who he defends on defense. Now, of course, I have Luka on Jaylen Brown, as I said before, but if Luka's not ready, then put Derrick Jones Jr. on Jaylen Brown. I think that'll be an interesting matchup. And then for Derek White, I have Kyrie Irving. I think Kyrie Irving was a primary defender on Derek White through the regular season. I think he did a pretty good job from what I saw in the clips that I saw. He did a pretty good job. Obviously, again, with Luka, though, if Kyrie has to exert so much offensive energy on the offensive side of the ball, then Kyrie's not going to be great on defense. And Derek White is not a guy that you just hide someone on. So I think it'll be interesting how Jason Kidd navigates these defensive or potential defensive struggles, because the Celtics can really attack you from all three levels. They could force you to play a defensive strategy that you don't want to play, and I think it's going to be interesting how Jason Kidd navigates that and adjusts in the middle of the game, depending on how the Celtics play. And there were some defensive struggles for the Mavericks in the regular season, as the Celtics won the season series with 2 wins to the Dallas' 0, one pre-trade deadline and one post-trade deadline. And I think the key for the Dallas Mavericks in this series to win is limiting the 3-point shot, because pre-trade deadline, the Mavericks had a game in a 9-point loss to the Celtics, where Jason Tatum was 2 for 8 from 3, Jaylen Brown was 2 for 7, Derek White was 1 for 7, and Peyton Pritchard was 1 for 4. But even then, the Celtics were smart enough to adapt as the game went on, and they were able to attack the paint with ease. I mentioned earlier that they could maybe force Tatum to start shooting more threes, but in this game, which Tatum shot 2 for 8 from 3 from, Tatum ended with 39 points. He realized his long-range shots weren't falling, but then he started driving to the rim, he started drawing fouls. I believe he had 19 free throw attempts in that one game, and that's going to be a key for the Celtics as well. Knowing that Jason Tatum knows when to take the smart shots, knows when to stop taking the 3-point shots when they're not falling, and start driving to the rim. Start using his size, start using his body to go into the paint and attack and draw free throws, It's going to be interesting to see how Tatum navigates that, but it's going to be interesting to see also how the Mavericks navigate the 3-point shot, because very rarely are you going to see the Celtics struggle from the 3-point line as much as they did. And this game was, of course, before the trade deadline, so Dallas was without Daniel Gafford, and Derek Lively, he was only a couple of months into his NBA tenure, so if you want to throw that game out of consideration, I understand. So instead, let's look at the game post-trade deadline, which was on March 1st, and that's where Dallas traveled to Boston, and they lost by 28 points, and in that game, the Celtics shot 48% from 3, no starters shot below 40% from 3. So I think you understand why the Mavericks need to take away the 3-point ball to ultimately succeed in this series. And as for the Celtics, outside of the obvious, which is stopping Luka and Kyrie from taking over the series, the key is going to be about the one starter that I haven't talked about so far, and that's Kristaps Porzingis. Now, I haven't talked about Porzingis for a pretty big reason, and that's because he hasn't played in over a month, and he's been kind of a mystery so far. If I'm not mistaken, he is off the injury report for Game 1, so he will be playing. But if I'm a Celtics fan, I have to be at least a little bit nervous, knowing that Porzingis is going to be jumping straight into the fire in Game 1 of the NBA Finals, where they cannot afford for him to play his way back into playing shape. He needs to be ready, and he needs to be ready to take over the game. This is a guy that put up 20 points a game in the regular season, a guy who was a pretty good rim protector while in Boston. I mean, he needs to perform the way that we know he needs to perform in order for the Celtics to succeed in this series, and honestly, I just don't know if he can, because I don't know if he's in playing shape right now. We know nothing about Porzingis, and we'll see when Game 1 tips off, but ultimately that is something that I have to be nervous about just a little bit if I'm a Celtics fan. If you just look at the facts and the stats and the previous game results, I think it would be pretty clear to pick Boston in this series. They just outplayed Dallas in their previous 2 matchups, and for the regular season and postseason as a whole, the Celtics have looked really, really good, almost unstoppable at certain times. However, this is a different Mavericks team than when they played the Celtics, and I know it has to be a little bit concerning if you're a Mavericks fan to know that the Celtics did beat us pretty handily in the previous 2 times that we played. But this is a different Mavericks team. This is a different Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving, a great supporting cast around them that wasn't so great in the regular season. I think it's going to be interesting to see how this series does play out. But ultimately, in my head, I think the Celtics do win this series. I think it's close, but I think the Celtics do win this series in 6. However, I will say that if the Mavericks do push this to 7 games, in a Game 7, I would take the Mavericks over the Celtics, even if it's in Boston, because I do not want to bet against Luka Doncic in the Game 7, especially how great he's been this playoff run, especially even with the injury. He's now had a week off to rest up that knee, and it is still a concern. He still is on the injury report. but I'm going to bank on Luka Doncic if it goes to a Game 7. But with how great this Celtics team has been, with how dominant they've been on both sides of the ball, with how well-rounded that starting five is, I just cannot pick against them. So for my official prediction, I'm going with the Boston Celtics to win the NBA Finals in 6 games. Go ahead and comment below who you think is going to win the NBA Finals, and how many games, and what you think the key factor to this series is going to be. And I'll be back in a couple of days with an NBA Finals Game 1 and Game 2 reaction. But until then, thank you all so much for the support. Remember to like and subscribe if you're new to the channel. And with that, I'm Julian with Talkback Sports, and I'll see you next time.